Hi everyone. Hello. Welcome to today's Women in Football webinar. The webinar today is part of Women in Football's webinar series, which we have set up free during the COVID-19 crisis as a way of getting women to connect and network during the lockdown. So for today's online fireside chat, we have Dr. Rimla Akhtar MBE with us. Dr. Akhtar was captain of the British Muslim women's futsal team and is an accountant by trade, starting her career at PwC. She's since held a variety of strategic and boardroom positions. She's a member of the FA Council, being the first Muslim and Asian woman to be appointed to it. She's a member of the FA Inclusion Advisory Board and chair of the National Game Finance Committee. She's also on the board of Rugby Football League and Sports Ground Safety Authority. Dr. Akhtar is also the founder of Rim Consulting, which advises organisations on inclusive governance, leadership and delivery. And in 2019, Rim Consulting launched the Get On Board programme, which is a campaign to mentor and assist BAME women to take up places on sports boards. And it's been very successful to date with around 10 women getting places on boards. Dr. Akhtar is joined by our very own Jane Purdon, who is CEO of Women in Football. And I'll hand over to Jane now for this session. I hope you guys enjoy it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Poonam, and welcome everybody. And if you have questions, do put them in the chat function and we'll ask them of Rimla as we go along. Rimla, welcome, hello, and Eid Mubarak, how are you?
Thank you so much, Jane. I'm very well. I'm really glad to be here and looking forward to our chat.
Great stuff. Let's start with Eid and lockdown. Obviously, the coronavirus is an unprecedented event in our history. I want to talk to you about how it's been for you, but let's just focus on the last 3 days. What's Eid in lockdown been like when you haven't been able to go out and celebrate with family in the way that you would?
It's been different for sure, but I mean, Ramadan obviously was in lockdown as well, and we're so used to going to the mosques in the evenings that it was definitely different, but introspective, which I particularly liked. Spending time on your own and really making the most of the time, and it's the same with Eid, I guess. Those that are on their own found it a bit more difficult. I have my family around, so it was, you know, kind of in between. It was a balance, but yeah, it was different. We hope that the next one, which is in just over a couple of months' time, won't be the same.
Yeah. Now I'm just going to pause there because some of you might be hearing lockdown is lifting around my house because they've started work on the building site next door but once. I'm just going to close my window. Excuse me. There we go. I hope that's better. Now, in Ramadan, you took the opportunity to promote the 30 Nights Challenge. So can you tell us something about that?
Yeah, as if I don't have enough things to do, I decided to do that as well. So the Muslim community in particular, over the years have seen, and it's improved in terms of the activity levels amongst the community, but we're still lagging behind a lot of others. And so I wanted to do something, you know, not just that fact that we tend to be one of the least active communities, add to that, you know, Ramadan and kind of tires you out a little bit sometimes. Some people actually are able to run multiple marathons, as I've found this Ramadan, but many aren't. And then the lockdown as well. So we just wanted to do something to keep people focused on their physical well-being as well as mental well-being and emotional well-being. So yeah, we did a campaign to keep everyone active, moving every day. Managed to break my brother to do some training videos for them, which people have found really useful. So it's been a really great campaign and a good learning actually for us as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Is that something you might continue?
Yeah, we're hoping to. I think it's worked in so many ways. We've created, you know, we turned it around in a week. We decided a week before Ramadan that we're going to do this. And for anyone who knows, you know, online-based campaigns, it's very difficult to build a community. And we've got over 1,000 people who've been engaged, which is what we wanted. And it's clear that people want more. So we're going to think about ways and speak with Sports England, who've supported us for this particular programme, to see how we could do more in the future.
Yeah. That's fantastic, Rimla. And what sort of people have been engaging? Have you had people who perhaps haven't been physically active before and this has been a first for them?
Yeah, I think it's a real mixture. We've definitely had those that, you know, do normally train, and, you know, someone like myself who would go to the gym or play basketball or football. For people like us, it was definitely that there were those that were like me. But there were also people who wouldn't have considered, you know, some people, when I told them Ramadan and working out, they sort of laughed at me. You're crazy, it's not going to happen. So we had those people actually engaging as well. And we had some, you know, school kids as well, so who have been at home and have really enjoyed doing this with their siblings. We've had loads of amazing videos and pictures through, so a real mix of people, which is great.
That's absolutely fantastic. And I think it's an example of a couple of things that we've perhaps all learnt through lockdown. One, about new ways of finding and enjoying community. And I suspect all of us have something we've maybe tried for the first time, or something we've tried for the first time after a long time. So I'm just thinking more widely about the way it's been for the past 3 months, and apart from the 30 nights challenge, is there anything that you've particularly enjoyed about lockdown? We know that many people are in desperate situations, so I don't ask the question lightly. But what for you have been the main learnings out of lockdown, do you think?
I think the greatest thing that I've seen is sort of long lost values, as I call them, that have sort of resurfaced in terms of community spirit, which tends to come up when there are such crisis situations, I think, whether it's on a local level or a national level. So we've really seen that up and down the country. I've certainly seen it in the area that I live in. And I think that this sense of really understanding what's important to us, and when you apply it to the sports industry, or any industry in fact, it's that idea of purpose and sustainability. So it's something that's been spoken about for so many years, and particularly the younger generation is sort of carrying that baton now in terms of what does good governance look like from a sustainability perspective. And that for me is something that people have started to consider more and more now, which has been really great to see. Those conversations that I used to feel like I was having, or speeches that I would make around, you know, the need to consider what our purpose is and what our vision is for a more holistic community, and not being purely driven by revenue and the bottom line. That for me has been a really great thing to see in the shift. I think on a personal level, a very personal level, as I said earlier on, I'm quite introspective, quite reflective as a person anyway. And so having this time with family, I'm used to working from home, so with family, having time to think, having time to do things and think about things that I wouldn't have otherwise, has been really beneficial for me. And I'm sure others can probably resonate with that as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's so interesting you talk about taking a kind of purposive, I've said that right, approach to sport. And I know, and I've known you for many years, that your career has very much been driven by values. So let's just go to where it all started. You worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers for many years, and then you decided to start a social enterprise focusing on sport and football. So that's quite a leap, and a very brave one.
Yeah, it was.
What made you take that leap?
You know what? Sometimes, you know, you get all these stories about how people knew what they were going to do, and I think for me personally, in that stage of my life, you know, having chaired the Muslim Women's Sport Foundation for a number of years, the sense of purpose through sport specifically had been embedded within me. So I knew it on a personal level, but it was only through the foundation that I got the opportunity to really help support other people through sport and give them all that confidence that I gained growing up through the games that I played. And so, you know, people said to me at the time, I'm ruining my career if I leave PwC, and people thought I was crazy, and what's all this voluntary work you're doing? Why are you doing it? But I knew that I wanted to do something different. That I knew in my heart, and it was just the obvious thing for me. I was doing all of this stuff voluntarily, and I thought, why don't I make this what I'm really about? Yeah. So again, it wasn't about a career or about, you know, making money from this. It was just about, what do I love doing? I've got the opportunity to do something with this, and why don't I just take it? Sometimes the opportunities are right in front of your face, and you have to take a step back to look at them and see them and think, is this something I can work with? And I knew it was, so I ran with it.
It's a fantastic story, Rimla, and it speaks a lot about conviction and having faith in yourself and in your convictions and what the world is telling you, all the things you're picking up about what's going on. What would you say to any woman who's thinking about making a similar move?
I think it would be the same thing, that take a step back first and foremost, really reflect on what you're doing right now. Does it feel right to you? And I think when you listen to your heart, then you do get that sense of knowing what it is that you want to do. Sometimes things can be really difficult to see because there's just so much confusion around you, or there's so much to do, in fact, sometimes. But taking that step back can really help you to clear some of the clouds that are in front of you. And yeah, just believe in yourself and believe that you can make something of what what you want to do. I think the biggest thing I did was, like you said, just have that conviction within me to know that this was the right thing, and that came from reflection. And go with it and keep reflecting along the journey. If things aren't working out the way that you want them to work out, then think about why that is and what you can adjust, what you can change along the way. Success doesn't come overnight. It certainly hasn't for me. And again, also actually using that word success, how do you define success? What does success mean to you? Does it mean, as it does for some people, in terms of the positions you hold, or what people think from the outside looking in? But for me, it was really about looking at it from the inside out and saying, what does success mean for me? And what it means for me is seeing more, in the case of Get On Board, more BAME women around me in positions of decision making. For the foundation, it was about engaging more women from Muslim communities and getting them active and getting them healthy and fit and feeling great about themselves. Same thing with the Ramadan challenge. It was just, what does success mean? And people don't necessarily see the journey to get there, but they just see you there and they think, wow, that's amazing, I can do that too. It takes hard work, and I would just say keep at it, stick to your convictions, and just remember what success means to you.
Yeah, well, we've just had a lovely comment from Kairan Noor. I hope I've pronounced that right, Kairan. This is a great session. As a Muslim woman in the sports field, it is encouraging and inspiring to see such accomplished peers doing great things and achieving their dreams and goals in the sports sector. So lovely, thank you for that comment, Kairan. I think it shows from that in itself is a mark of success, because I know it's very important to you that you inspire, and we collectively inspire other people to walk a similar journey.
Yeah, I think, sorry, just to say, I think that the diversity of role models is something that's been missing for a number of years. And it's just been great for us in the work that we've been doing, you've been doing, Jane, and Women in Football as well, to say, look, we've got this amazing group of people that you can see can do the things that you want to do. And I just think that that's a really important thing.
100%. So let's talk about governance, because you've touched on it. Both you and I have worked in the governance of sport for a long time in various ways. You obviously now have a portfolio of board positions and a very interesting portfolio spanning not just football, but sports stadiums, rugby league. So when you think about your range across sport at the moment, where do you think the governance of sport is at now? What's changed and what still needs to be done?
I think that the governance of sport has come a long way. I definitely do think that, and I think that's largely because of the Code for Sports Governance the UK Sport and Sports England put out a few years back. I think that it's driven a focus actually across the sports industry, but we still have such a diverse set of organisations, both in terms of size, as well as in terms of how they actually apply the governance principles that are in that code. So I think that, I couldn't say that all organisations are at a certain place in their journey, but everyone's going along that journey now, which wasn't happening before, because they were very closed organisations, very much driven by the way things had always been done. But I've seen, at the FA, I've seen at the RFL more recently, organisations are realising and recognising the benefits of being well-governed organisations. It's not just about how much money you're going to get or not get. It's about being the best organisation you can be. So people are organisations and people are starting to really move further down that journey now, not being at the beginning, but being further down that journey towards what does gold standard governance look like.
What do you think? It's great to hear that a lot has been done, but there's also more that needs to be done. What do you think are the key governance challenges for sport that still remain to be tackled?
I think for me, in my experience, with the organisations that I've worked with, it's less about the sort of things that you can get done quickly and easily. So it's not about things like transparency in the sense of, are you making it really clear how you're spending your money, or the board structure, or the lines. Sometimes it's about the things that are less tangible, so things like culture, and how an organisation treats its people, how an organisation, the lines of authority within organisations in terms of where does decision making truly, where is it truly held. And I think particularly for me, with all the work that I've been doing over the years, it's a diversity thing. It's about, are we really representative of the people that we serve? And I think in the vast majority of cases, you'll find in many ways that still organisations aren't able to say, yes, we do have representatives of the people that we serve. I look at the FA and I see that there's been a huge shift in terms of sort of gender representation at the board level, yes, but also at the senior leadership level and the executive pathway. But I have yet to see that representation from an ethnicity perspective. It's something that the FA is very aware of and wants to change. And it's in the targets that they have for themselves. But then you'll compare that to another organisation who they very much work and live and breathe within the same community that the FA or the RFL works within, but aren't able to say that we have that level of representation, or we include, for example, working class communities within our sport, or we include non-white people in our sport, etc. So for me, that's the one that I'm continuously grappling with. The RFL's done some amazing work around diversity and inclusion, and I've seen it now that I've gone in, and I'm a southerner, I'm from London, so rugby league's very much a northern sport at the moment, although we want to obviously change that. But yeah, it's still got some distance to go in terms of some of the areas of diversity, even though it's as an organisation they've done a lot across various aspects.
And we'll come on to talk about your project, Get On Board. But before we leave this question, I saw with great interest last week, as I'm sure you did as well, Rimla, the new code for governance for county FAs, which I know has been the output of a long project of work by the FA and county FAs, and it's based on a code for sports governance, but with some innovations. I was really interested to see that every county FA must have a youth council, which is a brilliant idea. But for our purposes, women in football, just a shout out to everybody listening, watch this space, because all the county FAs are now going to have to work to have more diverse boards. There's a huge opportunity. They're going to need more women. They're going to need more people of colour, and all the other diversity metrics they're going to have to look at as well. Personal opinion, I really do think this is the revolution in football when the governance of county FAs it begins to be modernised. Rimla, I don't know if you've got any reflections on that development.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while coming. We've been working very hard behind the scenes. I know the executive at the FA have been very much behind this. And to be fair, I sit on the National Game Board. I've been elected to it for this season. But prior to that, I was co-opted onto the National Game Board for three seasons since joining the FA Council. And I've seen the discussions that take place, and very much the whole National Game Board, all my colleagues around there were very much for this code. The diversity angle was not an issue at all in the discussions. It was very clear that the idea is to represent your county, the people within your county. and they have no problem with putting that through, and why would anyone actually? So it's been something that's been easy to put through in that sense. And I think that the desire to move towards better standards, to be more resilient as an organization, to be sustainable, people recognize that, and they recognize that this is moving us towards best practice. So I've seen those discussions happen. It has been a long time coming. As you can imagine, it takes time to go through specifics of what the code's going to include, making sure that it's relevant to the counties. You know, a small county compared to a larger county like London, for example, you know, you still have to make sure that you're applying it at the right levels. So it's fantastic to see. As you said, you know, just if you're interested in these kind of roles, it is a perfect way to get involved. I've already seen the work that we've been doing around inclusion and diversity at the county level through the inclusion advisory groups that each of the counties have. That has helped us see a change in the diversity at the FA council level. So not just at a local county FA, but seeing people progress from there into the FA council has been wonderful to see. And we just hope for more of that, really. This is where it's going to change.
Fantastic. We've had a lovely comment from Jacqueline Winstanley, just picking up on something you said earlier. Agree completely. Changes will come from organisations who have inclusive working practice throughout. So it's not just a question of the board, it's, I think your point, culture. But thinking about boards, let's talk about Get On Board, your project to work with a group of 12 women to get them board ready. Tell us a little bit about the challenges you faced setting this up and the challenges that those who've taken part have faced.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to talk about some of, I mean, it's a lot, again, it's taken a while to get there, but I'd like to talk about the journey and really what's great that's come out of it. And it's been a case of, for years, obviously, as someone working within the industry, someone of colour, someone who's got a, you know, visibly Muslim and a female, you know, add all those elements of different aspects of my identity together, and you're creating a pot of things which really put up, it's not just one glass ceiling, it's probably about 10 or 20 glass ceilings in terms of that journey to the top. But it's, what I wanted was to ensure that nobody else of any background, but particularly those that find themselves at these intersections of equality strands and areas of diversity, that I wanted to ensure that they didn't have to go through the same processes, the same bureaucracy, the same discrimination, and that feeling of being alone in that journey. I wanted to ensure that they didn't go through all of that and you know, more. And it was back in 2014, I believe, the end of 2014, I was just reflecting on Get On Board on my website. I put up a blog the other day, reflecting on how we got here and got to the position of actually having the Get On Board program put together. And it was a group of women actually across football who came together, women of colour, and you know, we had that discussion about what are the key issues right now for us, not having this sort of let's just offload. Yeah, there was a little bit of that, you know, what are we facing, but what are we going to do about it? Because we are all in a position where we can support one another, but we want to change how things are done in the future. And it was actually from there that it was very clear that mentoring, you know, just mentoring, even not just in a sense of my career and I want to get to a certain position, but mentoring in terms of how do I deal with walking into a room full of people that look nothing like me, who don't understand me, who have all these stereotypes about what I'm about, where I come from, in their minds. How do I walk into a room and deal with that every single day of my life, you know, for work? All sorts of things. And so it was really clear that something needed to be done, and that's where I put together this sort of program. So this program was put together a number of years ago, but it was through the Code for Governance and the discussions actually when you were at UK Sport, actually, Jane, you know, and the guys at Sport England, the conversations that we had to say, what more can we do to ensure that the principle of ensuring diversity across sports organisations is actually applied. And that's where this sort of program of the Get On Board program came from. It's part of a wider program that Sport England have put together to put together a list of board ready candidates for board positions. and they're doing that with Perit Laver sort of leading that piece of work. And you know, the idea of that, I mean, it's one of those things. I'm sure many of the women on this chat have also heard this, and you might have heard this as well. It's this sort of sense of, you know, you'll keep saying to people that, you know, get more diverse boards. There are people out there that can be on your boards, and they'll turn around and say, where are they? I can't find them. We tried for this recruitment drive. We tried to get diverse candidates, but there weren't any. And it was just the fact that we were a bit tired of hearing that, where we thought, okay, well, let's do this. Let's put together a board list. And here you go. You've got this huge list of board ready, diverse candidates to choose from who have every skill set under the sun that you could be searching for, and no excuses really. And it was Sports England that actually asked us at Rimla Consulting to really focus on the BAME women piece. And I'm really glad that they did, because the women, you know, we had two sets of women. One set of women who were board ready, in the sense that they've had board positions before and they're very comfortable to walk straight into that. But then there's that group, you know, the group that we consulted with all those years ago as well, who might need that little bit of support and that little bit of mentoring through their first board role. So that's what Get On Board was about. And I guess the challenge for them, actually, we had, I think, about 2, if not 3 out of the 12 that were on that program had been going for board positions in the sports industry for years. They'd tried 2, 3, 4 times. They'd had awful experiences, actually, in some cases. You know, I heard about one, I won't obviously say who and which organization, but she went for a board position. She went for the interview, and the gentleman who was, well, I'm not sure about gentleman, but the man who was sat opposite her in this panel, you know, turned around and said, what's a pretty little thing like you doing applying for a role like this? And it's those kind of experiences, and there's worse, trust me, there's those kind of experiences that have really put those women off applying, or made them more determined in some cases to keep going, but still dealing with the impact of going through something like that. And those women that had struggled to get onto boards are now on boards, because of 10 months of mentoring and training and support. There was nothing wrong with those women. They were perfectly ready to go onto the board, but they just needed that little bit of support to get on there. And they got that from everyone around them. So yeah, we're really proud of what we've achieved. We hope we can do more of this in the future, but it just depends on the support that we get to do it.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful story. And what strikes me about this is, again, that importance of having someone who's got your back, you know, in this case, the programme and you and Rimla Consulting, to say, you can do this, we've got this, and a network to help you. And sometimes that concept we talk about private boardroom of people who are cheering you on. So that's fantastic. We've had a question from Sabrina Dodds, who asks, what skills and experience would you recommend that people, women, she says we, I'll take that as women, get in order to hold such positions?
I think it's not one skill set. What I would say is look at what you do on a day-to-day basis. I think we as women, and I think ethnic minority women to a greater degree, really do tend to play down largely a lot of what we do on a day-to-day basis, the skill sets that we have, whether it's things like, for me, it was financial, right? So I've got the D&I stuff, I've got the diversity and inclusion stuff, which was another thing. I had to make sure that people didn't pigeonhole me into that area, because I'm a chartered accountant. You know, I've worked in the city, I've worked with FTSE 100 companies right through to family businesses. I've worked across all these different industries. I know what I'm talking about when it comes to governance and finance and etc. So it's really about saying, what do I do in my day-to-day life, and what skills are people looking for? You might be a pro when it comes to social media, for example, or digital. Digital's a massive thing, you know, for years, and it's not just in the sports industry. You know, on boards you've got individuals who are generally white, old, male, right? That's what we've had over the years. And I've spoken to some of those who are allies as well, and they'll turn around and go, Rimla, I do not know the first thing about digital and technology. And this is where younger people in their 40s, 30s, 20s have got an advantage over them, because that's where the world is going, and we're seeing that right now. So look at the areas of life that you have a certain skill set, whether, like I say, it's finance, whether it's digital, whether it's marketing, whether it's communications, because now that sports organizations are looking at the diversity of their skill sets, they're actually, you know, doing a whole skills matrix piece and saying, what is it we're looking for? Because they're doing that, you can quite easily fit into you know, one of the skill sets that they're really lacking or looking for. I would also say, you know, don't focus on one or two particular organizations in terms of, you know, I have to get onto the board of this organization, or I have to get onto the council of this organization. Start with the opportunities where you can really show what you're about. And for me, yeah, I got onto the FA Council, but like I say, I was there as an inclusion and diversity, sort of that angle, because I came from the Inclusion Advisory Board onto the council. But I went to the Sports Ground Safety Authority, and that was my first role. When I went for that interview, that was my first role, which was outside of the D&I space. But they saw all my accounting background and finance background. They saw my experience as an individual who's done community sports, as a fan, someone who knows the game inside out, etc. They saw all of that other elements. And Sports Ground Safety Authority is a wonderful organisation, a really important organisation, actually. One of the organisations that as fans we don't even recognise or realise the work that they do. But it was when I got to know it a little bit more, actually through an old Women in Football board member, Ruth Shaw. I got to know the organisation through Ruth, and realised the importance of the work they wanted to do. And I thought, you know what, this is a fantastic organisation. I would really love to get onto the board of this organisation. So it wasn't the one I was thinking of straight away, but I just thought my skill sets match what they need, and I'm going to go for it. So I would say really try and match yourself. That's what we've done with our Get On Board candidates, is look at what skill sets they bring, look at the organisations and what they're looking for, and say, you would be perfect for this, and I know that you'll enjoy being a part of this organisation.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I want to ask a little bit more about Get On Board, but we've had a comment from Maria Fernandez, and I think this is really interesting because I think she's picked up on youth councils, but it touches on pathways and how you might need to start somewhere else in order to build up your experience and confidence. And she says, being on the London FA Young Leaders Council a few years ago was an important starting point for me, helping me realise I could work in football. So I think that's very interesting, and, you know, good luck, Maria. I hope that council experience may lead you to think in the future that you could apply for a board position. So just a little bit more about Get On Board, and we've had a question from a member, Michelle Dorgan. She sent 3 detailed questions, but I think to kind of sum up the drift of them, it's really about the experience of the Get On Board graduates, for want of a better word. What are they finding from the organisations they're now working with, and have they identified any specific examples of the impact they've had, of the change that might be happening in the organisations that they're working with?
Yeah, so they're quite new into their experiences. So I think the first member of the Get On Board programme who got onto the board, Priya, she got onto the board towards the end of last year, so it's very new for her. I think they've had maybe 1 or 2 meetings since then, but she's taken it to a duck like water, you know, just really going with it. But obviously with COVID, the pace of change and in terms of what she's been able to do it's a little bit difficult for me to say she's had this impact. I think it's very difficult for anyone, to be honest, to have that kind of impact. But what she certainly, and not just her, actually a couple of others have said, is I can tell straight away that I was needed. Yeah. This alternative voice was needed in this space. And, you know, I completely bring a different angle. And for some people, and I certainly felt this in the start when I was the only one there and talking about things that were really not things that were talked about normally, I bring up a point that nobody else would bring up. And I used to see it as maybe I'm not speaking at the right level, I'm not being strategic enough. But actually, when you speak to the individuals and get feedback around the board table around how they felt my contribution to the discussion, how it was for them, they actually turn around and go, you've got us to think about things that we don't normally think about. And I think the great thing was that people like Priya, myself, and others who have got onto the boards, those women bring the experience of community And again, I think this is something that we downplay. The experience of community is huge. Ultimately, these sports organizations are serving communities. They're serving people like you and I. And so sometimes, you know, I think that's one thing that was fed back to me, some of the get on board candidates, that it almost feels like sometimes I say something that isn't what's normally talked about. And what my feedback to them, like I said, was very much, that's perfect. That's exactly what you're there to do. You're there to shake it up a little bit and get them to think differently.
Yeah, 100%. We, as you know, we work a lot with women as well, and on the board ready piece. And one of the things that I think people who haven't applied to join a board before can find a little bit daunting is the application process and the onboarding process. What should people expect from that, Rimla?
You know, it's, for me, I've always taken it, and this is the same thing I said to the girls in the program, take it as any other job application. Yes, it's a board position. It seems like this lofty sort of thing that's potentially out of reach, but just treat it like you would any other job application in your life. You'll have a little bit of nerves along the process, but you know, it's a very simple thing in the sense that make sure your CVs have been checked by someone who's like, this is something we did with Get On Board Girls, was get someone from Parrot Labour to look at their CVs and see how they could change it up and shift it up. And there are many people out there who'd be willing to do that for you, not just, you know, if you don't have to be part of a program for that. Make sure your CV's written in the right way to really identify and put out there for people what you are about and the skills that you'll bring to a board, because a board CV is very different, you know, to what a day-to-day job would be. But the process of doing that is really important. The application itself is so important in terms of making sure you can demonstrate, you know, you hit all the skill sets that they are looking for, or not all of them, but you know, at least some of them, the essential ones that they're looking for. The fact that, you know, you show that you have a passion for the board that you're applying for and the organization and what it's about, and you have that knowledge. You have to get some of that across, so that when they read that cover letter, when they read your CV, they go, yeah, this person's really interesting, we'd love to speak to her. You know, it's, and this comes back to another point that I always say to the girls in the program, and anyone that asks me about joining boards, it's not just about joining any board, it is about making sure you know why you want to join a board. So for me, that first sort of, the FA one was really obvious with FA Council, that I felt like I had something to contribute, and I love football, like I live and breathe football, so it was really obvious. But the Sports Ground Safety Authority wasn't as obvious for me initially, because, you know, it took me a while to get to know what the organisation was about and really think about, one, can I contribute to it, and two, do I think I'll enjoy it? And I can say yes to both because I really thought that through. So before you apply, if you want to get your passion across in a cover letter, in an interview, you have to really think before you apply, is this an organisation that I truly want to join and that I really think I can contribute to? And, you know, I would really recommend also, I think what's been really useful for the girls that have gone through the interview process, whether they've been successful or not, because I think there's been a couple of interviews that haven't been successful for a couple of girls, but they're then going to their next interview. They've gone to their next interview in that 10-month period, and because of COVID, the process has been finished, but it's a lot more positive. But they've had the opportunity to be coached through that process. They've had the opportunity to speak to someone and say, you know, what questions would be asked in that interview, and then actually have an opportunity to try and work through those answers in their minds with someone else who's been through that experience of going to an interview. So I think all of that is really, really important. That's why this program was so useful and so successful, because they had that support right the way through. So I would make sure that you can try and get someone to mentor you and support you through that process.
And I think if God forbid, that, you know, I know many organisations work very hard to get their board recruitment process right, but if somebody has a bad experience, like the colleague that you mentioned, there are people they can speak to about that and report. Do you want to just say a little bit about that, Rimla? I mean, don't suffer in silence, I think is the...
Yeah, I think 100%. And, you know, for me, you know, me personally, because of the connections I have across the industry, that's something that I'm really keen to do for absolutely anyone of any background, of either gender. Like, everyone has those experiences, particularly, you know, stereotypes or these kind of comments that are made that you just think, would you say that to anyone else in that situation? You just know that people wouldn't. Whatever it is, as you've just said, Jane, don't suffer in silence. Speak to somebody you trust with that, and think about how you can raise it. For me, it's really important that we raise these points. So one of the elements of Get On Board was to get feedback from the Get On Board candidates about what their experiences of not just the interview process, if they've been through an interview, but also in terms of some of the aspects of training that were an element of Get On Board but were not delivered by us. There were actually instances of unconscious biases and just cultural stereotyping and comments that were made in those training sessions, and you think that shouldn't be happening. And the important thing for me is it has to be fed back. And I've been able to feed back to the right individuals to make sure that that gets changed. And then we've seen the change happen. People have recognized that they shouldn't have said what they said. They've recognized that they need to check themselves and recognize the biases within themselves. So it's really important for me that we find, you find a route if you have unfortunately gone through an experience like that or will go through that experience. It's really important for me that that is checked and as quickly as possible.
We've had a comment about the importance of inclusive recruitment processes, which I know is something you and I have talked about before and is so important. And I would just add, you know, when I worked at UK Sport and we gave public money, that's your money, my money, the money of everybody who's on this call right now, into sporting organisations, and there's a real quid pro quo in that. You get public money, you conduct yourselves properly, and I would have been very angry to hear about a recruitment process where there was bias. So again, just to reiterate, people shouldn't suffer in silence if that happens. We need to move on, Rimla, because we've got loads of things to ask, but some questions firing in. A great one here about male allies, which you mentioned, and this is from Ali Speechley. How can we maximise the support of male allies in helping other men who maybe aren't so comfortable with diversity to get on board with what we're trying to achieve for the benefit of everyone, not just women?
You know, it's a really simple thing that I'm going to say, nothing too profound, but I think that personal leadership is really important. And I think that the way people learn isn't necessarily through courses and theory, but actually through watching other people and how they behave and learning from that behavior. And I think that all the men, whether it's my own brothers or whether it's the men I've worked with, you know, if I look at my time on the FA Council, the most welcoming and most supportive individuals on that council were men in their 60s and 70s, white men in their 60s and 70s, who saw me come in and probably treated me like their granddaughter, to be honest, but they treated me in a way which was respectful, and encouraged me to take up positions, encouraged me to move forward. They saw what I brought to the council, and they encouraged that. So I believe that through the individual behaviours of one or two men on that council or anywhere else in the organisations that I've worked with, has then influenced the behaviour of other men around them to really think about, oh, did I make the right judgments or assumptions about this individual that's coming onto council or onto our board? I believe that's the way. So I believe that our men should just lead by example, should in the right moments, as we do as women, you know, really, and I think me in particular, really pull people up when they say something or do something that's just not appropriate. I believe when it comes from different places, and I've started to see that actually in just, and this is from a more positive angle, I guess, you know, on the National Game Board, when I was co-opted originally, I'd be the only one that was comfortable talking about inclusion and diversity, and everyone else sort of listened and agreed. But now I don't talk about it. Someone else comes in and asks a question or makes a comment about that sort of aspect of things. So I really believe that, like I say, personal leadership, lead by example. The men, you know, our men should do the same thing, and when the time is right and it requires it, call people on what they're saying or thinking.
Good answer, thank you. So when we think about your portfolio of board positions, and it's you work obviously with the RFL and the FA, and one of the questions I love thinking about and put to you with your experience of rugby league and football is, do you think sports have different cultures?
Oh, 100%. I think there's definitely things, that every organisation will have its history in terms of how it's gotten to where it's gotten to. The RFL Rugby League positions itself very much as this sort of rebel sport because that's where it began, right? It began from separating from rugby union in the start. So it's a rebel sport. It always does things differently. And I've noticed that actually in terms of, as an organization, how things are run and how people think more, really broadly, and try things out that other sports I've seen just wouldn't. And the FA's for years been very entrenched, and we've all seen this in its ways in terms of, back in the day it was just 11 aside on a Saturday at 3 o'clock or whatever it was, the timing, or a Sunday. It was very much, this is how we've always done things, this is how we'll do it in the future. But actually you start to see that change happening, and in some organizations, I guess because of the size of the organizations as well, and the layers of bureaucracy that you have, you feel that change takes a different amount of time than it would at another. So I think all of these aspects of organizations impact them. But yeah, every organization is going to be impacted. Culture comes back down to the people, right? Yeah. So if as an organization you don't have that diversity of thoughts, experience of future visioning, even what you want to see for the future of your organization and your sport, if you don't have that, if you have all everyone that thinks the same way, then your culture is going to be defined by that. And that's where diversity is going to have a huge knock-on positive impact, hopefully, on culture and how organizations work and breathe and live and who they serve.
Fantastic. Moving on, Rimla, there's one question that we often debate around the women in football table as individuals, and that's actually the things that we failed at and how we learn from those. And we're very keen to show, we're not super women, none of us are. We're ordinary people who've worked hard and made plenty of cock-ups along the way, and I'll be the first to put my hand up and say I've left my trail. I really have. But the trick obviously is to learn from mistakes. And I was wondering if you could give an example of that from your career where something maybe hasn't gone right, but it's been a massive learning point for you.
Yeah. Oh gosh, so many I could give. And I think this comes back to the point earlier on that success doesn't come overnight. You've got to, for me, you have to constantly reflect on yourself and your behavior and your impact. So I would say that the biggest thing I've learned, particularly over the last 2 to 3 years, is my impact on people. So let me just briefly explain that. So I, as a young person, having experienced racism, Islamophobia, sexism throughout my life, and the intersections, like I say, of all of that, you walk into a room and you just feel this sense of activism, and you feel this sense of, right, I've got to say what I need to say, and if something's wrong, you say. And somebody actually said to me, she's an executive coach, but she's also a friend. She said to me, Rimla, you're just handing out the truth to everyone. I'm like, here's the truth, guys. Here's the truth. I'm giving it to you all. And she made me step back and really think about how I deliver myself, and on a human level, as frustrating as it might be, because you as an individual have gone through so much rubbish that you just feel like the easiest thing for you to do is just say it as it is. But I've really learned that tends to create, on a human level, a bit of a barrier. And it's difficult for people to keep hearing that truth, to keep, just to keep dealing with me, with my, this is wrong and this is wrong and this is wrong. So how do you coach and support someone who has good intentions? There's a difference between someone who has good intentions and someone who's just not interested. How do you coach and lead someone through that process of really making change? And so for the last couple of years in particular, I've been thinking about how to have better impact with people, that's more positive, that's more long-term, and just not keep handing out the truth, as my friend was saying.
That's a fascinating one, a great example. I would say don't lose it completely, handing out the truth. Sometimes people just need to know the way it is, guys. It's a great, and I entirely agree with your point about reflection. I think that's so important. But when you look kind of outside and into other people who you admire, how important have role models been in your career, Rimla?
You know, people have asked me this before in terms of the importance of role models. Obviously, I've not had one individual or even 2 or 3 individuals that I would say, you know, this is someone I've looked up to and wanted to do exactly what they're doing or something along the lines of what they're doing. I think as a young, like I say, Asian, you know, Pakistani heritage woman, of a Muslim woman, and then on top of that hijab wearing, I have not had people that I could look up to. My only role model in life, if I had to choose one, would be my mother. And that's for obvious reasons as well as non-obvious reasons, because I won't go into our life story now, but it's been quite a journey. And she's someone who, if you see that, you know, you've said it earlier on, that people see that I'm values driven, and I'm driven by service to community, and I'm driven by improving you know, just wanting to improve our lives as a whole. That comes from her and from her family, you know, her parents, her mother, and etc. So it's, for me, been a case of picking up things that I love in all the people that I come across. So not about having a role model as such, but saying, Jane, I really love what you're about, and this is what I'm going to take from you. There have been many people across my life who have taught me lessons in difficult ways, as well as just by, like I said, leading with you know, having that personal leadership. But for me, I mean, this is, again, Get On Board was all about that, the fact that you need mentors, that you need role models, that you need people, and they don't have to be exactly like you are. So some of our girls were paired up with women who weren't from the BME background. Some were paired up with men who were from BME background, and each of those people have brought something special to those girls, and that for me is really important in life.
Well, we've had a question here, just I think showing the impact this talk has had, Rimla. When will the next Get On Board programme start, and how do I apply?
Well, at the moment, this was just a one-time programme that Sports England supported because of the wider programme that I mentioned earlier on that Sports England are doing with Parrot Labour. It's not to say that I won't be pushing for for more, because clearly there is a need for it. And one of the other areas that definitely, again, you know, we all know it anyway, but it was through the programme that it was really brought just brought up again, really, for me, the idea of the executive pathway as well being really important. So it's not just about non-executive pathway onto boards, but also the executive pathway, and how women of colour basically really have to deal with a lot as they aim to make it up into those senior leadership teams and beyond. So that's something that I really want to focus on, but you know, we're having those conversations at the moment.
Well, that question was from Rajni Rahman. So Rajni, watch this space. Remember, if you do go for second phase, let us know and we'll publicise it. And maybe you can use this feedback to support your case with supporting the executive pathway thing. I think is a fascinating thing, and you and I touched on this when we were talking last week, and I think it'd be great to have another conversation about that, actually, because it's a whole different topic. But we've got 5 minutes left, and I want to change the subject completely and talk about football.
Okay.
I mean, we have been talking about football, but I want to talk about football now.
Okay.
So, listen, Rimla, massive Liverpool fan. What do you think of this Liverpool team?
Oh, I love it. I always say I started supporting Liverpool when they became rubbish. So I can't be called a glory hunter, because I started supporting them sort of in the early 90s, which is when they stopped winning all the titles. And then Manchester United came in. So it's been a lot of a painful journey. But I've had some really great experiences. You know, I was in Istanbul in 2005. I've been to the last few finals as well. So it's just been a roller coaster ride, as it always is with a sports team. But you know what? What makes me so excited, I'm going to sound like I don't know what the word is for this, but I just love Jurgen Klopp. I love his leadership style. I love the way, you know, from the moment he came into that club, you could see it, because you'd watch after games how he'd come onto the pitch and hug all these players and all that kind of stuff. So I really love his personal leadership, and I'm actually really interested to interview him on that. I don't know if I'll ever get the chance. If he's watching this back, maybe. But no, I really love his leadership style, and I think the team itself are so great. Different personalities, diversity again, different personalities, different backgrounds, but all coming together with one purpose, and that just, for me, I'm in love with this team.
Do you think it's the greatest Liverpool team ever?
Oh gosh, if I say that, someone who's my elder will probably turn around and go, never. But certainly since I've been supporting them, the greatest team, definitely. Team, yeah. I mean, we've seen, even since I've been a fan of Liverpool, we've had some individual players who've been amazing. You know, John Barnes and Ian Rush and Robbie Fowler and all these players, you know, just, but as a team, oh yes, I think the best team I've seen.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, we've only got a couple of minutes left, so let's think about the future. We know we live in certain times, but maybe that's given us all a bit of time to dream also. Mm-hmm. So do you have any big goals or dreams for the future, Rimla?
I think for me, just to continue what I'm doing, I think I'm really loving the work that I'm doing right now with the FA and seeing the changes that are happening there, really seeing the difference that those changes are making. The RFL as well, really, really loving the time that I'm, you know, spending there and learning from that organisation as well. And all of my roles, actually, I just feel like I'm in the right place right now. But what I want to see for the future really is the industry itself lead and come to a place which goes back to my point that I made at the start, that it's about purpose. I think for too long, in certain sports more than others, we have been driven by money. We have been driven by where the money is and where the money will be gotten from. You know, I'm not naive in the sense that I know ultimately you need money to invest in other things. But being driven by that for me is not what it's about. It's about the social values and the impact that you have on individuals, and ultimately that's where the real difference is made. You know, my life growing up, for me, sport was this equalizer, and I want people up and down the country, internationally as well, globally, to feel the positive impact that sport can have on their lives. So I really hope that we move to a more sustainable, a more purpose-driven industry, and one that's more fair. I think just on a societal level, it's, you know, outside of just sports, I think it's really important that we start to decrease some of the gaps that are out there, the inequalities that exist. And I hope that some of the values that have resurfaced will help us towards that. So that's really, it's a bit, it's intangible in that sense, but we need to start to map out the pathway to that better future for everyone, because I think in the current situation, with things the way they have been prior to COVID, it was just unsustainable. So I hope that things will really change for women in football, for women and men all across the world who feel those inequalities.
Wonderful thoughts, Rimla. Thank you so much. We've had some great comments on the chat, great discussion, inspiring session. Thank you so much. We'll forward these comments on to you so that you can see them. We do need to wrap up because it's a minute to 12. I think we could have gone on because there's a lot more I wanted to ask you about, but thank you. It's been absorbing and fascinating. Just for everybody watching, do let us know on Twitter or on email. info@womeninfootball.co.uk is the email, and @womeninfootball is the Twitter. Your thoughts on this webinar. We're continuing to run this programme over the next few weeks, so look out for your email in your inbox soon. And if you have any suggestions for who you'd like to hear from, let us know that as well as we continue to run this series of fireside chats. Rimla, it's been an absolute pleasure. Enjoy the last day of Eid. I hope I speak to you really soon. God bless. Thank you again for joining us. And to everybody on the webinar, we'll see you all again next time.